Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be starting a new series on this channel, and honestly, kind of the series that was the inspiration for this channel. So obviously, we focused on a lot of the Oscar stuff over the last, month or so, and obviously that is a big passion of mine, so it is something that I like to do, and so it is something that, I wanted to do on the channel. But initially, the idea for this channel, the name being The World's Worst Cinephile, the way that that came about was from, me throughout my life, just talking to people, talking about how much I love movies and how many movies I see, and so the idea is, I'll have people in my life, like friends and family, that they'll call me a cinephile, or ask if does that make me a cinephile. And in reality, I have to look at it and be like, well, no, like just because I watch a lot of movies. I watch a lot of like the new releases. I watch a lot of like new films, things that aren't, I can go and tell someone that I've seen Madam Web, and I don't know if that is what gives you a cinephile tag, the big thing that makes you, I think, a cinephile is obviously the classic films, your understanding of the classics, understanding of certain directors, understanding of just film as a whole, a lot of kind of the workings of it, and that's something that I'm not quite to that level. And so, and especially when it just comes to seeing classic films, there's a lot of films that I just have not seen. And so, a large part of this, the idea for this channel was, I wanted to. There was one day I was like, I'm going to start watching just a bunch of the class, since I see so many movies, I'm just going to go find all of the movies I can find and watch just a lot of classic films. But then, decided that it would be fun to kind of have a YouTube channel to kind of document this journey. So a couple years ago, this was who knows how many years at this point. There was this graphic that was just floating around on Facebook. And I mean, this is so many years old to the point that I don't know where the origin of this was, but it was just a big thing that was going around on Facebook, this bucket list, 100 movies list, and, everyone was posting it and checking off how many they'd seen. At the time that this was going around, I had seen embarrassingly few of them, right? Like, it was so little that I had actually seen. And in the years since, I've checked, a decent amount off this list, just, in prep for other movies, or finally going back and watching some of these films that I hadn't seen. But there's still 56 films on this list, as as I checked a couple days ago, that I just have not seen yet. And so we're gonna go to this website here, which is just Wheel of Names. And so on this list, I've put in all 56 of the films that I haven't seen yet, into this list, and we're just going to give it, a couple shuffles, and then we're going to randomize it and see what film I'm going to be talking about in the second part of this video. So let's see here what film I get. It is, looks like it's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So this is there's a couple films on this list of these 56 films that I don't necessarily like. I didn't, like I knew a little bit about. There's some that I know a lot about, just haven't seen them. There's some I know nothing about. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is closer to probably that category. I don't know a whole lot about it, other than I think, it's a Western, and that's about it. That's really all I know about this film, so I'm excited to check it out. So I'm going to go watch the film now, and then I'll be back with a review. While the Civil War rages on between the Union and the Confederacy, three men, a quiet loner, a ruthless hitman, and a Mexican bandit, comb the American Southwest in search of a strongbox containing $200,000 in stolen gold. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a spaghetti western from 1965 directed by Italian director Sergio Leone. The film stars Clint Eastwood as Blondie, Eli Wallach as Tuco Ramirez, and Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes. Right, so I just finished The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it's interesting because right before I for you guys less than 30 seconds ago in this video, pretty much, I was mentioning that I didn't really know a whole ton about this film. I will say that the one bit, I guess the reason that I knew the name of the film so well, I mean obviously it's an iconic film, like everyone knows the name of the film, I think, but for me, I think the reason that I knew the name was because the sports radio channel that I used to listen to a ton, they always had a a segment where they called it the good, the bad, and the ugly, where they would just break down different things that happened the previous day in sports. Whether something like a good story, a bad story, and then like something that's like more controversial, like an ugly story. And it was as I was like watching the film that I remembered this. This is like over almost a decade ago that that I was listening to this show, and so as soon as I was listening to it, I was like remembering about that. And I promise I'm not going to do the same thing here. I'm not going to break this review down into the good, the bad, and the ugly, mostly because there isn't really a lot that's bad and almost nothing that's ugly about this film. I will say before we get into a bunch of the highlights of the film, I will say the one thing, and a lot of people will tell you this with this film, that I didn't love and I didn't like at all really is kind of the dubbing. It's the ADR. And for me, again, I knew pretty much nothing about this film, and so when I was watching it, at first I looked the film up on Letterboxd and saw that, it had, where there's the name below it was like the Italian, I believe it's the Italian because of Sergio Leone. It was like the name in Italian below it. And so then I was thinking, oh, is this film not even in English? When I first was looking up the film, again, I knew nothing about it. So then I go and and I'm watching it on Max, and instantly it just goes into the English, and it says that's the original language. So I thought, okay, cool. And then even early on, like with the three English, the main characters, the English speaking characters, I was noticing where it felt like the voice didn't quite match, but I kind of was just like pushing past it, and I was thinking, okay, this isn't, it's not too bad. It just seems a little weird. But then, it's probably once you get into some of the Italian extras, where they're speaking Italian and then they're just being voiced over and putting the dubbing over them of it being in English. That's when I finally noticed, like, okay, I've got to be watching this on the wrong, language. And so then I was trying to find out, what language am I supposed to be watching this in? And on Max, the only two options it was giving me were English and Spanish. And I was thinking, it's got to be Italian if it's an Italian director. And so then I, had to look it up. I had to pause the movie and look this up. And that's when I learned about how all of the Italian actors just were, voiced over, dubbed over with English speakers, and so yeah, that is distracting. And it took a while, I think, to kind of just push past it. And I'm glad eventually that I did, because I will admit, early in the film, it was really distracting not having the voices entirely match up, and you can tell it's all voiceover and it's like ADR work. So I will say that is kind of the only real bad negative part of the film. And again, if you listen to people talk about this film, I think everyone's going to bring that up. That is a kind of a common, a lot of people don't love that about the film, and I agree. But ultimately, I don't think it completely ruined the film at all for me. So let's get into the highlights. Let's get into the things that we're most impressed by in this film. And obviously, you can't start. Apologies, I don't have everyone's names memorized, so I'm going to be looking down a little bit here. You can't start a review for the good and the bad and the ugly without talking about the amazing score and the music by Ennio Morricone, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Obviously, it's an iconic, like, if you think of the Western tune, like if you think of any Western movie, or you think of like a film that's like parodying or paying homage to a Western, that classic music. And so when it was playing in this film, I had to pause for a second and wonder, like, is this the origin of that kind of classic tune? And from what I understand, it is. But it's just like that is just the music that is synonymous with with the Western, with that, with kind of like shootouts and stand-ups, stuff like that. It's just the way that that music is just so iconic, and it's not just that iconic tune. There's there's a couple other. I mean, just the even parts of the score that aren't like the well known. There's just so many more, the iconic music that is just brilliantly done. And so it's just and from what I've heard since kind of researching the film a little bit more after watching it, is that the music came first. They had the music first, and then they built the scenes around the music, which again is really, like, obviously not common. That's not how it usually goes. You build the music to craft the scenes you've already shot, but this is, they set the scenes to the music, which makes it just so much more, makes the music so much more cinematic in it. And so it just, again, just beautiful, brilliant score and music by Ennio Morricone. And then the next thing we got to talk about is the cinematography. Tonino Delli Colli. Again, apologies, I don't know if I'm probably butchering all these names, but the cinematography is beautiful as well. There's two parts of the cinematography that I think I love a whole ton in this film. Is there's a lot of scenes. It's the framing of scenes, the way that you're staging the characters in the scene. I mean, you think kind of the opening scene, you've got kind of the kind of cutting back and forth between these people kind of walking and meeting towards each other in front of like the saloon, and you get kind of the close-ups on the faces, but then you kind of get the wider shots that just frames the characters in interesting ways. There's just a lot of, and then obviously you kind of got at the end of the film you kind of have the standoff in the graveyard, the way that they're all shot and framed again with super close-ups on everyone's faces. I just think that the close-up cinematography is and the framing cinematography is really done really well in this film, as well as just like all of the nature cinematography. There's a lot of times where the camera just pulls back and you get a wide landscape and you get a wide view of just the scenery. You get a view of you'll have Clint Eastwood's character on the horse or whatever, and it's like backed up to where you can kind of still see him, but you're still getting a wide view of just whether it just kind of be the mountains or just the sand, the dirt, like just whatever it is in like when he's on the rolling down like the hill scene, it's pulled out wide enough that you see everything kind of like the hill. There's just a lot of like the nature cinematography that I think was just breathtaking and done very well in the film as well. So that's another highlight. And then of course, talking about the film, you got to move on to the direction by Sergio Leone. The decision that he made in this, where he extends numerous scenes, the direction to be willing to just extend a lot of scenes. There's a bunch of scenes, again, like I just talked about, the very kind of the first scene really of the film of you're following these characters as they're walking, inching towards each other in front of like a saloon, and just the way that with the music playing, with the score, the way that they're kind of coming together, it's really kind of building the tension for this moment, and then it just the way that he extends that scene to let it kind of go for a little bit to really just kind of build that suspense and build that tension, I think it's just done really well. And then there's the scene kind of later in the film with Tuco where he's running around the graves. He's trying to find the right grave that he's looking for, and I remember watching it, and after a couple seconds, maybe 30-ish seconds, thinking like, okay, this is kind of going on for a little bit of him just running in circles looking for this grave, and then the scene just keeps going, and it hit a point where, again, I kind of was feeling like, okay, I get it. He's running around, he's looking for the grave. Like, this scene we're already at a 3-hour long movie. This scene's just extending it, but then it just keeps going and it keeps going. This scene is so extended to the point that I think it was maybe not quite 5 minutes, but it was a pretty lengthy scene of him just running around looking for the graves. But again, it's set to the score, and that score is just making it so cinematic, and it's making it so something as simple as just running in circles looking at graves, looking at headstones. The set to that score makes it so cinematic, and there's just so many decisions like that in this film from Sergio Leone, making it just really truly makes this just so cinematic in a way that I wasn't fully prepared for, and something that I thought that maybe was just going to be something that you could say like, oh, it's just this is how films were made back in the 60s or whatever, but then really just kind of watching it and really getting the full picture, just really feeling how cinematic it is. Honestly, it just was really impressed with that direction, with that style. And then of course you just you have to talk about the story by Sergio Leone and Luciano Vincenzoni, I believe is how you pronounce his name again. Sorry, I know I'm butchering all these names. Just the story in general is just kind of in some aspects kind of like a simpler script, I guess, because there isn't as much going on, but it's the way that it's crafted. Obviously there's a lot going on within the plot, but it's really kind of stretched, and it's just crafted where you're kind of following these characters. And then it's interesting in the sense of for a script, for a screenplay, there isn't really a whole lot of dialogue in this film, which is fine. A film doesn't have to be full of dialogue or have a lot of talking, especially in this film, because it's when there is not a lot of dialogue, it's still done so well. But what really impressed me with the fact that there isn't as much dialogue, yet there's still so many like iconic and classic lines from this film.
See you soon. Idiots.
Hmm? It's for you.
When you have to shoot, don't talk.
You see, in this world, there's two kinds of people, my friend. Those with loaded guns, and those who dig. You dig.
Yeah, and so it's just impressive to me that you can have that many quotes, that many iconic lines, things that like phrases and quotes that you've heard, maybe not, they're not the most common in like cinema history, but still very kind of common, just like lines and quotes that I just think it's impressive to get that in from a film that has not as much dialogue as you would think it does. And then the last real highlight that I want to, give a shout out to is just the final scene. It's just really intense, and it's another one of those scenes that again it extends for a very long time. It's a scene that the kind of the graveyard standoff, and I mean, and even before that, it's tense and riveting, leading up to that. Just the entire final graveyard scene is just done so well. But once you kind of get to that final standoff, like that is what, like, you think when you think of a western, that is what you think of, is you think of, two, three people, just in the standoff, all kind of staring at each other, and just again set to the beautiful score, the cinematography, bunch of the close-ups on people's faces, and it extends again for multiple minutes. This one has to at least be 5+ minutes of them just kind of looking back at each other, and but each time it cuts to someone and they're, kind of their eyes are darting back and forth, kind of looking at each other. Since there's three of them, they're kind of always making sure that they know what the other one or what the other two are up to, and you're getting so much from just the looks of their eyes, and then it'll cut to, Blondie. It'll cut to Clint Eastwood's character kind of reaching for, for his gun, and then kind of pulling his hand back a little bit, and then kind of reaching, for the bullets, and but then, it'll cut over and you'll see someone else, and in each scene, each time it cuts, there's different levels of perspiration, they're sweating more and more, and so it's just the way that it's just so crafted, and it goes on for so long, again set to the score. You get simple eyebrow raises and squints, that just different things that like each of the characters are doing when the camera is close up on all their faces, that is just building so much tension and just kind of suspense, and it's making the scene just riveting, and it's going on for so long to the point that when it finally kind of reaches the climax of that moment, it's this kind of relief where you're just like, you've been in this state of kind of being real tense and just kind of, and even if you kind of have a decent idea of maybe what's about to happen, it still is like the way that it's crafted, the way that it's done so well. It's just, again, one of the most iconic, I think, final scenes probably in cinema history. So I'm really glad. And for me, if you've watched a lot of videos on this channel, you know how much I love final shots or final moments. Any scene that really kind of nails the ending is a huge plus in the film for me. There's something I love when a film nails the ending, and this is again just probably one of the most iconic final scenes in cinema history. So those are kind of the highlights that I had of the film. I do want to kind of end these videos, the Becoming a Better Cinephile series, I think is what I'm going to call it. I do want to end these with a couple questions that we'll ask and answer about each of the films in this series. And so the first question is, would I consider this a classic and a must-see film? Pretty much would I recommend this for you guys if you have not seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? And for this one, it is a yes. Even if you aren't like as big into westerns, like for me personally, I haven't seen that many westerns in my life, but this is one of those that it's one of those films that it transcends, it goes above just whatever the genre is. It's not contained to the genre to where, like, if you just despise the genre, you're going to find no value in the film. Like, this goes beyond that. So even if you aren't a big fan of westerns, I do think you would enjoy the film. And again, I do think it's a classic, solely because it's been referenced like a million times in cinema, and it's become kind of like a staple in the history of Hollywood. So it is one of those films, like, I would definitely, yes, consider it's a classic, and I would consider it a must-watch film. And then the second question that I think I want to ask for a lot of these films is it a film that I'll ever watch again? Is it something that I'm glad I watched it once and I'm done with it, or is it a film that it's has the potential to kind of crack my regular rotation from a year-to-year basis? And so for this, would I watch it again? I was leaning no for a lot of the film. There was a lot of it where I was just watching it and I was like, I understand this is technically it's good, the craft is good, the direction, everything is good about this, but it wasn't really like capturing me all the way. And so I was leaning no for the longest time of like, I think I'll appreciate that I watched it once, but I'll probably never come back to it. But then again, man, it's that ending. That ending is so good where it just like it hooked me. And I mean, and there's moments before the ending too that were hooking me and making me kind of turn the page of being like, oh, like this is, actually this is really good. I'm really enjoying this. But man, it really was the ending that just kind of sold me on the film and made me just instantly like, obviously it's a 3 hour long. At least I believe so. It's the extended cut. I think is what they have on Max. So that's what I was watching was the extended cut. So I wasn't gonna watch it instantly, but that ending does make me really want to get back to it pretty quickly and just like rewatch it again and just get to experience that again. So I am gonna say yes. I will watch this film again at some point in my life, and honestly, I think it might be sooner than I'm even expecting. It's something that maybe I push off for a couple years, but again, it's just because of how much I was thinking about that ending and how much that really just sealed the film for me. I think it is a good chance that I watch that sooner rather than later. And so for the good, the bad, and the ugly on Letterboxd, I am going to rate this 4.5 out of 5 stars, a 4.5. For me, it's my rankings of Letterboxd films, the way that are films on Letterboxd, the way I kind of always have done it is like a 5 star is a perfect. I love this. It's one of my favorites. Like I sharing this film with everyone. A 4.5 is kind of one of those that again I love it. There's maybe just a thing or two that aren't quite perfect, and so for me, I think maybe a little bit of like the ADR, the dubbing. It's something that I on the first watch and maybe some of the pacing early in the film. There's a couple things here and there that I didn't quite fully hit that like love it 5 out of 5, but 4.5 is again obviously really good, but 4.5s for me oftentimes very easily can get bumped up to 5s on second rewatches. That's typically happens a lot. If I give something a 4.5 on a first watch, it very easily can go up to a 5. And then like 4s, and it's also possible that it falls to a 4, but a 4 is just one of those where it's like technically it's obviously it's a great film, it's phenomenal filmmaking, but just didn't quite hit me as much as some other films. But again, this, because of that ending, it really kind of brought that up, I think, from a 4 to a 4.5 for me. So that is my rating on Letterboxd, is a 4.5 for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's it. That's my review here of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's also the first video of this Becoming a Better Cinephile, series. And so while I was researching this film kind of afterwards, kind of like looking at some things and, kind of checking on like the ADR and stuff, I did learn that this is actually part of a trilogy in a sense. It's not, not your traditional trilogy, right? But it's like I think the phrase is kind of like a spiritual trilogy where like the films are kind of connected. They all have Clint Eastwood, they all have Sergio Leone directing, but it's kind of westerns in the same vein, all within like 3 years of each other, but they're not direct sequels, direct trilogy, but they're all kind of spiritual successors to each other. So let me know down below if I should watch, or if you're interested in seeing me review. It's A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More are the two other films in the series by, I guess, of this trilogy by Sergio Leone, the unofficial trilogy. So yeah, let me know if those are films that I should see. And again, this is the first video of hopefully many in this Becoming a Better Cinephile series. So let me know in the comments below what other lists or what other things I should kind of focus, what other films I should focus on, whether that's, like the IMDb top 100 or like the Letterboxd top 100, pretty much any film review site, if they have a top 100 list, let me know of any of those that I should be looking at. And also, just like while you're in the comments, let me know of what films you consider to be classics that you think I should watch. If you want to kind of, my Letterboxd is in the description of the video if you want to kind of look and see what films I have or haven't seen. But honestly, you could just comment whatever films you consider classics, and if there's any that I haven't seen, then I'll put them into a list, and we'll do a couple different, besides this one little Facebook graphic, we'll do some other wheels, kind of pick random films at times and pick from other different lists as well. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and again, this is the first of hopefully many videos in this Becoming a Better Cinephile series. And I honestly, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was a great first film, I think, to start this series off with. I truly did love this film. So again, thank you for watching, and have a great day.